Today, we're going to see what happens when you combine trap with lo-fi. So the approach I want to take here is to take lo-fi textures but structure them out into a trap beat format. Meaning the fundamental structure in terms of the BPM, the drum patterns, the rhythms, those are all going to pull from trap. But the instruments that I choose as well as how I'm going to make them sound is going to go more towards lo-fi. So first let's set the BPM here. Again, this is something that I want to pull from the trap genre, so I'm going to set the BPM down to 65, which is a typical BPM for trap if you're working in single time, which I'm going to be doing here. And while we're in trap mode here, I might as well start off by structuring out the drums as if I was making a trap beat. So I'll start off my trap drum pattern with some typical trap hi-hats here, as well as a trap kick pattern, and my trap snares. If coming up with trap drum patterns or even lo-fi drum patterns gives you issues, I've made videos on both of those subjects, so hit the link right above my head if you want to check those out. Alright, so most of the trap elements are created, the structure is in place. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the more lo-fi elements now. Starting off with the main sample or the main loop, I'm going to choose something that has more typical lo-fi elements, more typical lo-fi instruments in the loop. And as always, you guys know the policy. Just some straightforward piano here like you'd find in a typical lo-fi beat, but the feel to it is a little bit more dark in terms of the notes that are being played, so I think it's going to work well in terms of appealing to both a lo-fi and a trap sensibility. But the sample as it is right now, it's a little bit too bright and polished and clean, so I'm going to do a few different things in order to make it feel a little bit more lo-fi. So I'm going to pitch this sample down so all the frequencies get pushed down as well, just so it's less bright and a little bit more lo-fi. By the way guys, I'm using Momentum, which is a free sampler that I like better than SliceX or Fruity Slicer, so if you want to check out a full tutorial on what this thing features, the link's right above my head. I'm also going to add a bunch of effects on top of this sample as well. Again, since I want this to sound a little bit more lo-fi, I'm going to really restrict the frequencies that this sample takes up. I definitely want to cut a lot of the high end here just because I don't want that high end clean polished sound to it. I'm also going to boost a bunch of these frequencies as well, just because the sample sounds a little bit weak after I made all these cuts. After this, I'm going to add some reels on top, which is a tape emulation effect. This is just an effect I love to use in pretty much all my beats. It just really does a great job of adding character onto my sounds. So as you can imagine, this is especially useful for lo-fi. While I'm at it though, I'm going to add some halftime on top as well. Even though I did pitch the sample down already, I still want it to be a little bit more dark. As it is right now, it still does feel a little bit too bright and polished. So halftime is the perfect tool with this objective in mind of trying to make things a little bit more dark. But now that I've used halftime as well as reels, you guys can hear the sample itself sounds completely recolored. So I'm going to have to add some more effects on top to shape this new sound that I have here. Alright, so you guys can see I added some more EQ on top and I really constricted the frequency spectrum that this sound is going to take up. I added Saturn, which is another saturation tool, as well as isotope vinyl, again to pursue that lo-fi aesthetic even more. Alright, so this is sounding pretty lo-fi to me. I'm going to go ahead and go through my different chops here and see if I can come up with a cool loop that I can use to be the foundation of my beat. That sounds pretty cool. Let's see what else I can find. I sort of like the idea of looping this over and over. So I'm going to start with this as my main loop. So I'll start working on my other sounds to get them to be a little bit more lo-fi as well. As you guys remember, my drums are going to sound very trappish as they are right now. Now I could add a bunch of effects on top of these drum sounds to get them to be a little bit more lo-fi like I did with my sample, but honestly it'd probably be easier overall to just replace them with completely different drum sounds that are a little bit more lo-fi instead. So I'm going to change these trap hi-hats that I have here. I'm going to use these more lo-fi hats here. Same thing with the snares, I replace them with this more lo-fi type of snare here. And same thing with the kicks. Alright, so far so good. Let's add in the 808 into the beat now. I could go ahead and add a more lo-fi type of bass into the beat, like an upright bass, but I think the beat overall would just sound much better with an 808 in it. Alright, so this 808's not really cutting through. I'm going to add a bunch of effects on top to actually get this 808 to sound better in the beat. Alright, so this sounds much better. If this is a problem that you guys run into where your 808s don't sound like they're actually present in your beat, watch the video linked right above my head where I show you guys how to get your 808s to actually show up and cut through in your beat. Now in this instance, I could go ahead and sidechain my 808, but I sort of like the idea of not having such a clean mix and having a little bit of muddiness. Again, I am trying to make a lo-fi beat here, so the idea of making everything as clean and polished as possible is not something I necessarily want. Next up, I want to add a little bit more into the beat. As it is right now, it does feel a little bit bare, so I think adding an additional melodic component into the beat will really help fill things out. But first, I think it would be a good idea to add some noise into the beat. As you guys know, that's a common technique when you make a lo-fi beat, but it does have some practical use because we're making a lot of cuts to the high end. And if you don't actually fill and replace the high end after you make your cuts, the beat might end up sounding unbalanced. So adding a layer of noise into your beat isn't just to pursue the lo-fi aesthetic, it also actually does have some practical use as well. This is one of the tips that I covered in my video where I showed you guys some really useful tips if you're making lo-fi, so check that video out right above my head if you're interested. So moving on, like I said, I want to add an additional melodic component into the beat. So I'm going to use a sound that shows up in a lot of lo-fi beats. I'm going to go and use a harp. But as you guys can hear, it sounds a little bit too clean as it is right now. So again, I'm going to do much of the same that I did with the sample. I'm going to just add a bunch of effects on top to make it sound a little bit more lo-fi. In fact, what I'm going to do is go ahead and copy this entire effects chain. And then I'm just going to adjust some of these effects, like the frequencies that I am cutting or boosting, as well as some of the smaller details here. Alright, so this harp is sounding a lot more lo-fi, and it's going to actually sound like it's going to fit with the rest of the beat now. Alright, so I like this little pattern that I came up with. I'm just going to build around this slightly, add a few more notes into this pattern that I have here. Alright, so this beat sounds pretty full to me now. I'm just going to add an additional couple layers here just for the hook section. Some of the longtime viewers will recognize this vocal sample. A nice free little lollipop will be given to whoever can remember which video I used this vocal sample prior. Now I can move on to arranging the beat, but nonetheless we have ourselves a lo-fi trap beat here. Now if you're interested in learning how to make a regular type of trap beat or a lo-fi trap beat, I have videos on those, so click the link above my head if you're interested in going for a more straightforward type of beat. I'll also add a link to those in the description box below, and while you're at it, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comment section below what you would call this genre. Is it low trap? Is it trap-fi? I don't know, let's figure it out. The link to my free drum kit is available in the description box below, as well as a link to the Discord if you're interested in having your beats reviewed live, and I will see you guys next time.